So my name is Kenji Yoshino, and I'm here to talk to you today about the Ally's Guide to Respectful Disagreement. So oftentimes when we think about ourselves as allies, we think that the purpose of our allyship is to support or reinforce the other individual. But oftentimes we can think of ourselves as somebody's friend or ally, but nonetheless engage in vehement disagreement with them. And today, what I want to do is to suggest that our disagreements can sometimes make our bonds stronger rather than weaker, so long as we pursue them respectfully. I will say that this seems like a particularly hot topic these days, not only because we're in the ultimate election year where half the world population is going to federal elections, but also because of global conflicts like the conflict in the Middle East make this an incredibly challenging time for people of good faith to be able to disagree about issues that seem so heartfelt and deep with regard to their identity. So my hope is that I will give you some very practical tools about how to think about disagreements so that your next conversation will go hopefully more smoothly. So with that, let me introduce you to the marquee idea in this segment, which is the controversy scale. This arrives from the work that I've done together with my executive director, David Glasgow, in a book that we recently published. And what we say is that not all controversies are created equal. So if we think about things that are very, very calm controversies, and then we think about sort of existentially deep controversies, we might array them along this 5-point scale. So we move from tastes to facts to policies to values to equal humanity. If you and I are disagreeing about tastes, like what flavor of ice cream is better, or which Netflix show is better, which sports team is better, those kind of conversations can be disagreements, but they're unlikely to get very hot. In fact, we could get closer to each other by good-natured ribbing about each other's terrible taste in Netflix shows or sports teams. When we move over to facts, things might get a little hotter, but if we're truly talking about journalistic facts, like who did what, when, where, and why, as opposed to fights over values by proxy, like the idea of alternative facts or misinformation, then we're still likely to be okay. Things begin to get much hotter, though, when we move into policies, because that's a normative view of how the world should be. Deeper still when it goes to values, and where these controversies can seem white hot and completely intractable is when one or both parties feel like their equal humanity is somehow being called into question. And one of the things that David and I have observed is that oftentimes one party is sitting at one point in the controversy scale. Here we have that person at policies, whereas the other person is at equal humanity. And this is where things can really go south. So I thought I would illuminate this by examples of debates that I've engaged in, where I was first in the equal humanity position and then later on was in the policies position. So let me begin in a pre-2015 world where same-sex marriage is not yet the law of the United States. And I, as a constitutional law professor, am going around the country arguing that it should be. In green room after green room, and prep call after prep call, my party's opposite would say to me, we know that you're in a same-sex relationship, so this may be personal for you, but we ask that you not make any emotional appeals from the stage because this is a policy debate and we want to have it as a matter of law as opposed to making emotional appeals on either side. And of course I said, yes, absolutely. I'm a constitutional law professor. I believe I have the stronger arguments on the merits of the constitutional law issues, and I will be arguing from those positions. But I do remember thinking that, wow, you could have done yourself so much good and not deprived yourself of any substantive argument if you had handled that slightly differently. If you had said, for us, this is an issue of policy, but for you, this might be an issue of equal humanity because you are in a same-sex relationship and it may be deeply personal for you. So we will try to be respectful of that in this conversation, both in the green room and on the stage. And to the extent that we fail in that, please let us know, because that is not how we want to conduct ourselves in this conversation. Now we're in the post 2015 world where the Supreme Court has made same sex marriage the law of the land in the United States. So now when I have these conversations, I am at the policy side and I'm arguing against individuals who want religious exemptions from civil rights laws that ask them to respect same sex marriage. So this would be the website designer or the wedding cake designer who says, I don't want to celebrate same sex marriages, and it's my free speech right or my free exercise right not to do that. So now the shoe's on the other foot, and I will say that it's much harder to take medicine than it is to dispense it, but I do take my own medicine here. And I make sure in those green rooms and in those prep calls that I say, I basically, am with the status quo. So I have the policies on my side, but I want to make sure that I respect that this might be an equal humanity conversation for you, because as I understand it, this is about whether or not you can live out your personal faith in the public sphere. And I would never want to do anything that would be disrespectful to you. And to the extent that I fail in those norms of respect for you as a human being, please let me know. That radically changes the tenor of the argument without depriving me of a single substantive point that I want to make. I will say that I will die on the hill of saying I don't think that those religious or free speech exemptions should be afforded, but I lose nothing in acknowledging that the other party has an equal humanity stake in it. Notice that we're not saying that you need to go over to where they are. We think that that's impossible. So your lived experience is so different from their lived experience that it actually almost denigrates the kind of distance between your life experiences to say, oh, I can fully empathize with you. What we're asking for instead is not that you go over there, but that you acknowledge their position on the controversy scale, and they acknowledge that they may be closer to the equal humanity pole than you are as you carry out the argument. So that's the first, and I will say the most important strategy that we have for you, but we have some others as well. So we see here, locate the conversation on the controversy scale is our number one tip for how to disagree respectfully. Number two is find uncommon commonalities. So this comes from the late great philosopher Daniel Dennett. So we all know in a negotiation or in a disagreement that we're supposed to emphasize commonalities. So it's negotiation 101 to say if you and your party opposite are trying to figure out what's fair in a particular situation, we tend to anchor on our disagreements. So it's useful for both of us to remind ourselves about the many things that we have in common. But what Dennett does in terms of his value add is to say, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck if those commonalities are somehow uncommon or surprising rather than something more familiar or anodyne. So to take the same-sex marriage debate and continue on down that path, whenever I mounted the stage to talk about same-sex marriage, I would begin by saying, my party opposite and I have many disagreements about this issue, but I want to emphasize that we have many things in common as well. So we both believe in the critical importance of marriage as a social institution. And there are many people in the world who are both straight and gay and of all different orientations who don't believe that marriage is a valid institution and that it should be retired in favor of just civil contracts or something like that. And my party opposite and I don't believe that. So against all those individuals, we're actually standing shoulder to shoulder with regard to the importance of this institution. So that, I believed, was an uncommon or surprising commonality that, again, helped reshape the debate to make sure that everybody understood that while we disagreed on admittedly very critical issues, we agreed on equally critical issues as well. Third, we want you to show your work on your remaining disagreements. So we borrow here from our elementary school math teachers who kept exhorting us to show our work. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but many, many individuals have documented this. Here I rely on the diversity consultant Lily Zhang, who writes very eloquently about this, of what we call the exploding can of soda. So you feel like you're raising a very innocuous point with your colleague, and then suddenly they seem to have this outsized response in disagreeing with you, and it's as if you've opened up a can of soda and it's exploded in your face. And what Zhang very astutely says is that the reason that that is a good analogy is because a can of soda doesn't start that way. the can of soda gets kind of riled up because other people have come and shaken it up before you arrived there. So you just happen to be the unlucky person who was kind of last in line after all these people had shaken up that can of soda, and it just happened to pop open when you were having the conversation. Why is that relevant to disagreements? It's relevant because oftentimes in disagreements, you are not the first person to disagree with your conversation partner. In fact, you're the last in a long line of people who have disagreed, perhaps in more reflexive and less thoughtful ways than you plan to do. So, in order to disambiguate yourself and distance yourself from all those prior interlocutors, it's really important that you be able to say, here's the research that I've done to arrive at my position. Here are the life experiences that have brought me here. Here are the relationships that I have that have shaped my view. And that will allow your conversation partner to see that you're different from all of the other individuals who have reflexively disagreed with them, and you are actually a much more reflective interlocutor. Last but not least, manage your expectations. So we realize, admittedly, that this is not going to make its way onto an inspirational poster anytime soon. It seems rather deflationary as advice. But what we're trying to get at is that oftentimes when we disagree, we hold the people that we're disagreeing with to the standard, right, of agreement with us that we would require of somebody who is very intimate in our own lives. So whether that's our spouse or a best friend or what have you. And that does a real disservice both to them and to us, right? So when I think about whether or not I could be married to or best friends with somebody who had a worldview that was fundamentally different from my own in terms of core values, for good or for ill, I think the answer is probably not. But then the question is that true of everybody in my community, in my workplace, in my broader, circle of acquaintances? Do I really have that high of a standard, or should I have that high of a standard for everybody? And the answer, we believe, is no. So just reminding yourself not to anchor on the most intimate relationships in your life with regard to how much disagreement you're willing to tolerate, and to say, this actually isn't my best friend. I don't even need to be friends with this person. I just need to be able to engage in civil and respectful discourse with them. If you manage your expectations, the conversation becomes a lot less hot. So just to recap, our 4 tips for navigating challenging disagreements and navigating them in a respectful way is to locate the conversation on the controversy scale, to find uncommon commonalities, to show your work on the remaining disagreements, and finally to manage your expectations. I hope this has been helpful in giving you some tips and strategies to think about how to disagree more respectfully.